Welcome back. Let's continue to this now. A growing number of countries have rejected Israel's recognition of Somalia's breakaway region of Somaliland as an independent nation, the first by any country in more than 30 years. Now, Israel became the first country to formally recognize the self-declared Republic of Somaliland as an independent and sovereign state on Friday. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel would seek immediate cooperation with Somaliland in agriculture, health, technology and the economy. Now, in a statement, he congratulated Somaliland's president, praised his leadership and invited him to visit Israel. Somaliland declared independence from Somalia in 1991 during a descent into conflict that continues to leave the East African country fragile. Despite having its own government and currency, Somaliland has never, in fact, been recognized by any nation until Friday. Well, joining us to unpack this is Donovan Williams, a social commentator and Mail and Guardian columnist. Donovan, a very good afternoon to you. So help us understand just the dynamics and, of course, the significance of Israel's decision to recognize Somaliland as an independent state. I mean, it's now obviously sparked growing international opposition. The AU, in fact, has warned of a dangerous precedent.
Yeah, I think once again, Israel is proving that it doesn't actually have a foreign policy, but it's just an agent or an attendant foreign policy of the United States. This recognition of Somaliland, a first country to do that, so it will be significant, is in the wake of the President of the United States, Donald Trump, calling out Somalians in the United States and saying they need to go back to their country and Somalia is a mess and they should leave, even calling out some people of Somali heritage who are American citizens who are in the Congress of the United States. So in the wake of that, you have a couple of weeks later, you have Israel deliberately recognizing Somaliland. One, of course, is because, as I said, it's pushing forward the ideas and the destabilization that Donald Trump has started to put on Africa, and in particular that area of the Horn of Africa, which is linked to the Gulf of Aden. But more particularly is that Israel itself will benefit from this because Somaliland, a country not recognized by anybody except for Israel and most probably soon the United States as well, will now recognize or affirm their recognition of the Abraham Accords and most probably signed it, but then also the latest plan that Donald Trump unveiled a couple of months ago on Gaza and the annexation in many ways of it. So these are layered in that way. Overall, though, the context that must be understood is that entire Gulf of Aden and Horn region are all linked. That entire coastline, that's Eritrea, Djibouti, Somaliland, etc., are linked to the overall geopolitical significance within the Middle East itself. And as we know, as the Gaza conflict has continued with the genocide in Gaza, has continued, Iran has been put under major pressure, and Iran has got a bilateral agreement with both Russia, bilateral agreements with both Russia and China, but in particular China. And the United States' entire security strategy, which they launched a month ago, is really centered on trying to increase pressure on China to act in particular ways. So in many ways, this is also part of that matter. And that's the major context that must be understood. It's about putting pressure on Iran so as to put pressure on China in a particular way. It is not about Somaliland. It's not about peace in that area, because there needs to be peace in that area, but it will just foment more conflict and create more confusion. And this is why the rest of the world sees this for what it is, a naked political step that has got nothing to do with the actual assistance of Somaliland.
Yeah, and I mean, just on that note, in terms of diplomatic implications, are we then witnessing, as some critics have said and put it, a shift rather from African-led conflict resolution to external factors in play here, or external actors redefining Africa's political map, as it were? And while we're there, perhaps also expand on your thinking then on just what this would mean for the United States of America.
Yeah, this is excellent, Donati. I think you are suggesting something that is quite important. Since the fall of the Soviet Union, the creation of both first NEPAD and then the African Union, there has been a big push by African countries saying we will sort out Africa. We want your assistance from the West, former colonial masters, even the United States. However, since about 2010, Africa has had difficulty. Managing their own affairs. There was a big push, as I said, with NEPAD and the African Union, but that has wilted or withered a bit. And that withering now has come to the fore. We've seen just last week the attack in northern Nigeria, the Americans bombing northern Nigeria, and basically getting acquiescence and supposed cooperation from the Nigerian government. But this does determine that African countries, those countries, particularly the founding countries of NEPAD, which include South Africa and Egypt and Nigeria, need to sit down and drive the peace processes in Africa. Because if they do not, countries like the United States will enter because, as we know, both China and Russia are quite prevalent within African economies. They have been for the last 10 years, to the chagrin of both Europe, particularly Western Europe, especially France and the United States. So the United States itself is now even more emboldened to interfere in the matters of African countries because there's a lack of leadership. There is a vacuum. And South Africa itself has to play a larger role that it had at the very beginning of the 2000s. And it has pulled back a bit, which is not helpful. And there needs to be those countries, as I said, particular South Africa, Nigeria, and Egypt, who need to get together and be able to push this peace process so that Africa can, or peace processes, so that Africa can be in charge. Also, what I would add, and that's in terms of the United States, there's a massive growth of ultra-nationalism, first masked as patriotism, but it's really fascist nationalism that is being driven in Europe and the United States. And those matters bear out that suddenly you can create Somaliland as a country as opposed to trying to resolve conflicts. You can do that in many parts. And we know our ethnic tribal matters that have been used to divide Africa. And it can be used even further because of this rise of ultra-nationalism, fascism in many ways within Western Europe and within the United States. And we need to be wary of that because that drives the United States government at the moment.
Yeah, and I mean, that was going to be my next question in terms of that division or creating that division. What risks does it further pose for regions that are very sensitive on the continent, you know, when you look at the likes of Ethiopia to the Sahel? And as we wrap our conversation, Donovan, I do realize I'm out of time. How do African countries, more importantly, start then to assert themselves decisively?
They have to assert themselves through the African Union and amongst each other. We have done it before, but if you're going to wait for a country to act and then respond, you should have been Ethiopia has been trying, but Ethiopia needed assistance in making certain Somalia as a proper government, Somaliland, they have discussions, so you can have some type of detente. But if you're not going to have that and you allow matters to fester, you leave the space for an Israel to create to take advantage opportunistically. So African countries, leaders in Africa need to get together and not be so interested in their own internal populism and so forth, but really deal with matters regionally. And South Africa has played a big role. It needs to play that role even more stringently now. I understand that you're running out of time and we'll stop it there.
Donovan, thank you so much. I do appreciate your time and, of course, your analysis. Donovan Williams, a social commentator and Mail and Guardian columnist, just speaking to us there about the implications, of course, and the growing number of countries who have rejected Israel's recognition of Somaliland, Somalia's breakaway region of Somaliland as an independent nation.